Welcome to the Think Factory podcast. We got one question for you. What keeps you up at night?
Welcome to the Think Factory's Women's Roundtable podcast, where we learn how women think big and grow business, powered by OGC Solutions. My name is Alka Bahal. I am a partner with Outside General Counsel Solutions and chair of our Corporate Immigration Services Group, and I'm pleased to be your host today. I am very excited to have with me here Karen Norheim, CEO of American Crane and Equipment Company. Welcome to the podcast, Karen.
Thanks for having me today.
It's such a pleasure. So can we start out with, tell me a little bit about your current role at American Crane.
Sure. I am the CEO of American Crane. And I've been here for almost 24 years. In the role that I am in now, which has been a long progress to getting to this point. I am, the buck stops with me. I'm setting vision for the company, where we're headed, working on strategic planning, building an amazing leadership team and maintaining that team so that we can execute on the business at hand for our customers in the different industries that we serve. So it's an exciting role. We're actually a second generation family business. I actually own the business with my sister. So that's actually really a pleasure. So I manage the company. I manage leadership and making all the execution of what it is that we do. But then I also manage the family, right? Making sure as owners we're responsible. And that we are also, making good decisions that keep the company going on well into the future.
That's complicated, having a family business, but when it works well, it's really incredible.
Yeah, it can be. It's a very satisfying thing. And the history of our company is there were 3 Norwegians that came to Douglasville, Pennsylvania. One of them was my father, and they started American Crane back in 1972. Now, my dad has a really interesting history. He was born in Norway on the small island of Lugra, which is off the coast of Bergen. He never knew who his father was, and his mother passed away when he was just 10 years old. He had a good family upbringing there in a farming community by his grandparents, but he sought the American dream coming to the United States. So those 3 Norwegians started American Crane. My dad was just a minority shareholder at the time, just doing engineering management and sales. And then in the early 80s, the primary shareholder ran the company into financial ruin. So my dad was at a crossroads, right? He could either, walk away or he could lean in. And so he, mortgaged the house, found a way to do it, and was able to take over primary shareholder of the company. And then that is the moment where, we really became the American Crane that we are today. He changed the trajectory of the company to be focused on highly engineered specialty equipment. So putting us into that niche space where craftsmanship and quality are really the most important things. And the rest is history. Here we are, today, almost 250 plus employees. Thriving, adding more. We've got, 30 to 60 more hires that we're trying to make in the next year. Things are booming. My father actually passed away in 2021, but he left us in a great place. And I think he'd be really proud of where we are and what my sister and I and our stamp on the business is. And I came into the business, like I mentioned, about 24 years ago. My father recruited me to come here. I did not think manufacturing was going to be that interesting. What are these things called cranes and hoists? And it turns out it was the best decision I ever made. And I have found my work to be so rewarding. I work with amazing people, really awesome customers, products, and applications. So there you go. There's a little bit of the origin story behind it all.
What a rich history you're coming from, and how much you and your sister have accomplished. So before we turn to your career path, tell me, what does American Crane do today? What is the company? What's its focus? And why are you better than the rest?
So we're a leading manufacturer of overhead bridge cranes and other lifting solutions. So what is that? similar to what you might see outside for mobile cranes. What we build is actually permanently installed, typically inside of buildings or different facilities. Still doing the basic thing of picking things up and putting them down. It's just that there's a lot of different ways to do that. And our customers that we serve are lifting things that typically are critical, complex, or difficult. For example, we work in nuclear power plants to move spent fuel. We also work in different power plants to help with turbine installation or maintenance. We work with NASA to manufacture spacecraft. They have our equipment installed. The new Artemis that is going to be headed up here soon. Our clean room crane has helped to build that. We're also, a part of the semiconductor industry. We have a very complex system that we have designed that is used with major semiconductor companies in the United States to actually do maintenance on the lithograph machines. So very specialized, highly engineered. I have very smart people who work for me, much smarter than myself. And, so that what makes us different is our ability to solve complex, difficult problems. Our technical know-how is really what sets us apart. And then our what we like to call grit. Our mantra here at American Crane is always lift, never quit. And we make sure, we're partners with our work with them to the end. A lot of what we do is challenging installations, difficult engineering, unique, one-of-a-kind situations. And so we work with our customers all the way to the end to make sure that they have the equipment that they need and they're able to do the work at hand. And we take a lot of pride in all that.
Excellent. Very cool. Excuse me. So turning back to you, you mentioned earlier when you first got into the industry, you thought, how fun could manufacturing be? And now it's your passion. So what shifted for you and what keeps you energized about this industry?
I think the most exciting thing about manufacturing itself is this idea that you can create something from nothing. I like to think of it as this amazing orchestra that's happening. We have our engineers who are designing the equipment. We have our salesmen who've worked with the customer to identify their need. Then our purchasing buys the components. Then our, shop is actually taking, raw plate and round bar and different materials, cutting it apart, fitting it together, creating weldments. Then we go, now the next step is that we're putting on different components and machinery and painting. The whole coordination to then create this amazing complex machine. And then, on the other end of that is our service techs going out and installing it. It's that orchestra of taking something from a physical piece of paper and bringing it into existence that I find very exhilarating. I really also enjoy working for people and creating an environment where people can thrive. I have a philosophy of let awesome people be awesome. And I really believe we have awesome people here. So I just enjoy working with them. I enjoy, growing leaders, growing our team, and really take a lot of pride in making sure that our culture is very intentional so that they are set up in a situation where they can thrive. So it's a lot of exciting pieces in there, and then our customers, like the applications that we get to do. I mean, I'm a dork for NASA and space, so to even be on the peripheral of that is really, really exciting. As well as some of the other customers that we have, just amazing applications for what it is that we do.
That is exciting. So as you mentioned, you've been with American Crane for 24 years, rising through the ranks to now be CEO. Really started working with your father, right?
Yes.
In the beginning, and evolving into this current role. What lessons would you say you learned working alongside your father that you still carry into your current role?
So many. When I came here, I was in my 20s, and, I started out in a role of marketing and quickly got IT added to that. So I was marketing and IT for a long time, and he was quietly mentoring me on the side to learn about leadership and people and the financials and all these things that I didn't know I would need until, further along, it became a little more evident.
Mm-hmm.
But some of the things that were ingrained to me is that people are the most important part of the business. They are what drives what we do. So we have to take care of them. They're also the most difficult part of the business, and you have to, it takes work and intentionality to get it right. That's definitely a huge lesson. He also taught me, practical things like from a business perspective, cash is king. I have been around when we had cash crunches years ago, and it's no fun. And I remember
Mm-hmm.
having to deal with that and step in the role that I was in at the time. So that was a great lesson. Also, he was a very entrepreneurial mindset of looking to the future and setting up, what's coming down the pike, 3, 4, 5 years out. And so I think I've cultivated the ability to kind of see the road ahead and make sure that we're set up so that when the team's kind of working through what we have right now, and I'm sort of making sure that I'm setting up as many possible opportunities, what I like to call gardening, that they may be able to harvest and turn into something in the future. So that was definitely a lesson. My father was from Norway. And so one thing that I always like to say is that he taught me to be a Viking. And what that means is to, one, be a gardener, which is cultivating myself and others, contrary to what you might think about Vikings. They were farmers first, gardeners, and then they went, a Viking. So it was really, really important. So again, taking that time to garden, to invest in my people, to invest in myself, to continuously be growing. So that's be a gardener. The other piece of it is to be a warrior, and that's know your craft. Know what you're doing, put in the hours, the 10,000 hours, I think it is, right, to become an expert in something, lean into that. And then also, knowing how to be show up as a leader, to handle when the pressure comes on, to be calm, to do those pieces. And then last, to be a storyteller, which is, what are the stories that we tell at American Crane? What is our culture? What are the stories, and how do we learn from that? Because just like the Vikings, we as humans learn through story. And the Vikings had an unwritten rules and laws, and the Norse gods. It was all storytelling in order to teach their culture and their ethics. So leaning into that with our people, and then also on a personal level, what are the stories that we tell ourselves? What are the stories that am I telling myself in my mind that I can do this, you've got this, or am I saying, oh, there's no way, I can't do that? So that's a lot about mindset and the stories inside of us too.
Incredible. So clearly, company culture is something you prioritize, important to you, people first. What are some ways you intentionally can cultivate strong value-driven culture at American Crane?
So I think the first thing it starts with is knowing what are the behaviors that drive success for us. And we have those as our core values, but they're really behaviors. What is the most important thing to be able to, meet our mission, which is, to delight our customers, know that our people are the most important thing, and be what we call gritty, which is perseverance, heart, and integrity into everything that we do. So, okay, so how do we do that? So by identifying our core values, we then talk about them regularly, we communicate about them regularly, highlight them regularly, and live them, right? And our leaders are emulating that and being great examples of that. In addition, we try to highlight and celebrate when we're seeing those behaviors, or when we have the good things that are happening. So I think that's very important. A lot of communication managers to people, leadership to management. We do monthly videos, we do monthly emails. We're really trying to talk about and keep top of mind what it is to be at American Crane. And we also have something called a grit team, which keeps events going and organizes events, organizes things in our community. We do a lot of outreach efforts, what we call Hoist Up, and making sure that we're being good stewards in our community. So it's really an ecosystem of supportive things, that from letting our employees know we appreciate them, to, celebrating once a year at our annual Grit Day, all of the great things that happen throughout the year, and giving people updates. And listen, we're not perfect. We're still working at this. We're evolving as we've grown as a company. We're now just trying to determine what else could we be doing or should we be doing. We're actually going to hire a full-time grit team manager. So yes, the journey never ends. It's like gardening, right? The cycle continues, and you have to just keep going with that labor of love.
Lovely. I have to say, I actually love that phrase that your goal is to delight your customers. It just says so much about you and your company and what your goals are. I love it.
Thank you.
So what would you say, so grit, common theme I'm hearing from you. What role has grit and resilience played for you personally in your own career and leadership journey?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a core of what my father taught me to be as a human, and then that evolved into what it meant to show up here as a leader at American Crane. If we look at grit and define it as this ability to keep going despite obstacles, we in the work that we do, so in life, I think that's so important, like being able to commit to something and not just jumping off when it's hard. I'll use an example of a sport because it's an easy one for me to explain. It's like golf, okay? Like if you just go and hit the golf balls once and then get so frustrated that you don't do well, you're not going to get any better. But if you lean into it, and I've enjoyed golf as a practice of humility and a practice of lifelong learning. You have to just stick with it to get better, and you have to understand that sometimes it's going to be hard and sometimes it'll go well. I think you can apply that same thing in life, right? I've had moments in my life where different difficulties on the personal side have shown up. To share a really personal one is, my husband and I tried to have kids and we were not successful. So I do not have children. I have my husband who's lovely and a fabulous dog, and we live a great life. But being able to move forward despite that obstacle and that belief of what I thought my life would be, and then finding a new way to define that story for myself is definitely, I think, an example of grit. And then on a company level, what we do is difficult. There's supply chain issues that happen when we're trying to put together some of our jobs. There's, our service techs might have to install something which is appropriate for while we're talking 10 degrees and it's snowing out. How are they going to install an overhead bridge crane into a facility? That we have that kind of thing. Or, we do work sometimes in hazardous spaces that are difficult to get into or hot or dangerous. How do we overcome that? How do we overcome, we are designing often, it's similar what we're designing, but each one has its own unique customization. So sometimes, we might hit a hiccup and we have to go back to the drawing board and say, hey, we've got to have to evolve this a little bit, and not getting deterred by it, but saying, okay, this is a challenge, but let's turn this into a solution. How do we provide a way around this and continue forward? Just from the nature of timelines and customer demands and things like that, there's a lot there. And so on the business side, I think it really, of course, shows up all the time. And I think there's a joy in being able to lean into grit and lean into that as a core sort of behavior. And I feel that the people here at American Crane, and myself included, we're gritty. My dad was gritty. I'm gritty. We don't give up. We always lift, never quit. That's who we are.
I love that. I agree with you completely. I think grit is one of the key traits that one can have in life and in business that's going to get you through. If you're prepared for those obstacles and ready to work through them, you're certainly going to be more successful in the long run.
Absolutely.
So tell me about your
key for success.
Yeah, tell me about your hashtag. Always lift, never quit. How did that develop?
Well, we before that we had a Grit Matters mantra, which is that we put perseverance, heart, and integrity into everything that we do. And we got to a point where we felt like it was time for a refresh and to rethink about it. And we really worked. We have a great video on our website at americancrane.com that tells that origin story of who we are as a business, the story of my dad, of him, coming to the United States, creating a successful business, having a successful life, and that channel of who we are as a company and the things that we value. as we were doing that process, it really evolved into this mantra of always lift, never quit. Just a great way to say who we are, what we believe in, and what we do. And we tied the launch of that with the video, and also we recently completed a mural on the side of our building that is called Always Lift, Never Quit. That is highlighting the history of the company. It features, my father, some of our employees and the industries we serve. And it's a celebration of who we are. We own it. We know who we are. We know what values matter to us. And then the other thing I think that does for us, practically it tells us as an organization what we value, but it also helps us with hiring and attracting new people, as we are, have over 30 open positions at the moment right now.
Mm-hmm.
We lean into that as a way to communicate, what it's like to work with us and be a part of our team. And then also to attract, customers too. I think it's important. Again, we have awesome people, and this is the mantra of who we are and how we get things done.
I like it. Very inspiring. Now, I know you mentioned you're a women-owned business. You and your sister now own the business, and you're an advocate for women in many other areas, especially in STEM and bringing women into manufacturing. Do you see progress in this area? Do you still see barriers that need to be broken to bring more women into the manufacturing industry?
I definitely see progress. Even in our own ranks, and I think a lot of the work that's been done so far, is around awareness that manufacturing can be a fantastic career for women. And I think it's so important, as many of us have labor needs, and that we attract as many people as we can to our businesses. And so I think progress is made, but I don't think it's time to stop promoting what a great career you can have in manufacturing. I don't think it's time to stop working on culture, making our businesses a place that women want to work, but also where everybody wants to work, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that it's really important to, you can't just say culture, and put it and say, hey, we have a culture and we're doing things. You have to be really intentional about it. If you are not setting the culture, if you're not telling the stories of what it means to be a part of your company, others are, and you might not like what that culture is. So as far as women, I think it's really important to continue to support each other, to continue to tell our stories, those of us that are in the industry, of our successes, so that we can inspire the next generation to come along. I like to think of it as a trail that we've been blazing, and it's there and it's getting wider, but maybe it's not quite paved. And I think the real key is an awareness of the great jobs, the great career, and the opportunities that exist in this amazing space of manufacturing.
Nice. Now, you've brought certain members of your team into leadership programs with you. How do you approach mentorship, especially for women?
Well, mentorship, we believe in training here for sure. And so we spend about 1% of our revenue on training, and that can be internal learning, what we call our 24/7 leadership training, which is learning about ourselves and understanding that everyone's different, has different personalities, different motivators, different pieces, right, to making who they are, and that all of them are important. And then we also lean into programs such as Vistage. Many of my top leaders are part of a Vistage group where they have peers that they can work with, that provides, I think, both mentorship and coaching. And then our leaders are trained in a very specific way on how we interact with those that report into us. We have one-on-ones regularly. There's time set aside. We have a guidance on how those one-on-ones will work, and the agenda that we bring there. We really lean into what we call accountabilities, not just your job description, but a ever-evolving accountabilities document that says, this is my job, this is all the pieces this is what I have the right to make the decisions on, and using that as a guide to mentor employees and help them evolve and get that time that they need. It's really a satisfying thing to do that. And then as far as mentorship, specifically, with women, I think that, leaning in and providing support to those that are here in our organization, and then also, providing mentorship and maybe even just like a role model. We'll be going next week to a STEM event for I think it's fifth graders, about 20 of them, and just to stand up there as a female CEO to say, hey, I exist and this could be you too. As well as my niece will be there with me. She's actually an engineer near here at American Crane, and kind of just showing that these are possibilities. I think that's what role models do for us. They show us the possibility of what could be there. But I believe in mentorship, for sure, training, guidance. I try to make coaching available to as many as possible. And, we're all on a journey. The work here of self-discovery and evolution is never done. There is no real destination for leaders, right? We have to kind of keep growing and evolving. The challenges that we're meeting are growing, and we have to kind of keep rising to the occasion.
Very insightful. So true. So true. So what advice would you give to anyone aspiring to the C-suite, to entering into manufacturing, male or female, this sort of new generation coming into the workplace? Any particular advice?
Well, I think what I would give is some practical advice on managing, your to-do, your inbox in life, and how to, well, number one, cultivating that grit we talked about. I think that is such an important thing for everyone to work on. I think the second thing I would say is what I was alluding to, is this idea that, you only get one life, and it's really important to make sure that you are the one who is making the choices and being intentional about it. And what I mean here is, don't get caught into the world around you that is constantly wanting to get your attention, from the pings on your phone and your email to the distractions on social media and all over the place, right? There is so much information being put at us, and it's only going to get worse and worse. I adhere to a system by a woman named Maura Thomas. She does some great work around managing your attention, because it's not time management anymore. It's your attention. How do we intentionally make choices about what we're going to work on, what we're going to do with our time, and not let others hijack that? I think if you can do that, and then applying that in the workspace to what you need to get done and prioritizing, I think it can be a igniter of progress, success, and growth. So that would be another recommendation. I think also leaning into, so often when I was younger in my career, I would often suppress the emotions that I was feeling, thinking that I needed to be this stoic person in the business, and that, I'm trying to use my emotional intelligence to understand other people, but I'm not going to, my emotions, repressing them, right? And that's not good. Our emotions actually are a feedback loop, and learning how to understand what your emotions telling you. If you get angry, it's usually a boundary being crossed. If you get jealous, it might be something that you actually want. If you get sad, it's telling you, what you value and what you care about, and not being scared of feeling, but instead leaning into it as this amazing feedback loop that it is, and then flowing through that emotion and letting it go, and then moving on. Too often we repress and we get stuck, and we never process what these emotions are telling us. There's a woman, Sean Kent Hayashi, has a book on emotional intelligence, which is really great and an easy read. It's available on Amazon, and it kind of shows you how to work your way through those different emotions. No one teaches this to us, right? We just are expected to know how to do this. I mean, Mel Robbins also talks in her book, Let Them, about this also, about how we're all kind of 6-year-olds and never learned how to manage our emotions. So I think that's a really key. If you can learn that feedback loop and really find a way to leverage it, I think it can be super successful for you. And then my last piece of advice is something that I learned kind of the hard way, is that, I make my health my number one priority. I CEO my health. I can certainly create strategic plans for my business and mobilize and get things done. But years ago, I was not paying attention to my health. And if I would have stayed on that trajectory, I could maybe I wouldn't be here today, or at least I was on my way to a heart attack, in the next couple of years would have happened. And I think it's really important to remember that you're no good to anybody, your family, your business, if you are not taking care of your health. And making sure that mentally, physically, that you are in a good space, right? I think we are most effective when we align with that. My story is that over the last 3 years, I found out I had calcification at age 43 in my heart. And, it's really young to have that. And I'm sure, I know it's stress related and, not poor eating and exercising habits. So with my dad's scares over the years and then of his eventual death, I leaned into it and I, worked really hard, eating and exercising, lost tons of weight, which was great. But now I'm healthy and I'm paying attention. I care about what I eat. I make sure I move. I'm not perfect, but what I've done for myself is instead of making my health and myself the last on the list priority wise, I make it the first on the list. And I highly recommend to the rest of you that it's not selfish. It's really the key to your success is, when you feel good, you do good, lean into that health piece and lean into understanding stress and how it affects you. I think that is a huge gift. And I wish I could tell my younger self that, and go back in time to lean into that more. So luckily I'm on a great path now, but that would be some advice. The other, thing out there is that we often are pushing and pushing and pushing. And this badge of exhaustion is this sign of how busy you are and how many hours you work is a sign of success. I think we have to really rethink that and be willing to take time to reboot and recharge. And that actually by taking a break and moving away, not only are we CEOing our health and giving ourselves time to recover and repair, but we may also be allowing our subconscious brain to be working on those juicy problems that we want to solve in our business and in our lives. So yeah, those are sort of the things that are noodling in my mind at the moment, and hopefully they resonate with some of your listeners.
Oh, I can imagine that they will. That's some really terrific advice in there, stuff that I'm going to take to heart, certainly. So what legacy do you hope to leave, both for the company and for the next generation of leaders?
Interesting with the word legacy. I have a hard time with the word legacy.
Yeah.
And I've been thinking about why is that? And the best I can come to is one, my goal is to live my best life, to show up and be present. And I think that's probably why legacy is sometimes hard for me to think about, to be here in the moment, still certainly planning and visioning for the future, but being present and not being always stuck in that future mindset. However, I also view myself as a steward. I'm the second generation CEO of the company, second generation owner with my sister. We want our family business to be around for the, next 50 years. It's over 50 years old now. And so I'm just a steward to the third generation of owners and of employees. As I mentioned, I don't have children, so hopefully the business will move on to my sister's children if they are interested. So I'm just a steward that is, growing, leading the business with integrity, leading it in a way that, keeps this idea of our people are our most important asset and delighting our customers. And then my goal is to leave it better than I found it, right? Growing people along the way and hopefully by being my authentic self, perhaps I can inspire some others to be their authentic self as well.
I love that. So to wrap us up, I have one last question for you, which we didn't talk about in advance. So it's a little bit of a surprise, but it is our traditional last question on the podcast. And that is, what keeps you up at night?
What keeps me up at night? I typically do sleep pretty well because I'm able to, process those emotions and put them out there. But if I had to really say, what am I what am I thinking about, or noodling, or creating a sense of urgency? I mean, there really is a lot of technology out there and a lot of change that is happening at a really an unprecedented rate.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's really important to stay abreast of emerging tech and to be playing with it and understanding it so that we don't get blindsided. For example, AI is the hot word with everyone, but really making sure that I understand what AI is and that we're integrating it into our business slowly and smartly, but that people are exploring it so that, we're not caught, 2 or 3 years from now behind the eight ball, like way behind our competitors because we haven't kept up with the curve. So that pace of change in technology, whether it's AI, whether it's other emerging technologies, whether it's our technology in the products, making sure we stay at the forefront and are staying aware. That's something that's a real big priority for me and for our company.
Absolutely. So, do you want to share with our listeners where they can find more information about American Crane and about you?
Sure. So our website is americancrane.com, and you can learn more about American Crane and all the work that we're doing. I also have a website, karennorheim.com, where you can learn more about me. I have a lot of fun projects. I actually have a children's book that's coming out in about a month or so. It's not on there just yet. And I also have a podcast myself called Always Lifting, which you can find on all the major channels as well. My website, karennorheim.com, it does have a link to it there.
And you also are a noted speaker, and people can book you to share your incredible insights, which they've gotten a little bit of a taste of today, right?
Absolutely. I'm always open to sharing. I believe, like I said earlier, it's important to be a storyteller and to share. And if it resonates with anyone listening, I'd be happy to chat with them about it.
Well, I've definitely enjoyed your stories today and your insights. I learned a lot. Very impressive. Thank you so much for joining us today, Karen.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for tuning in, everyone.